They called it Harmony Creek. A masterpiece of marketing, because the only harmony I'd heard in a week was the synchronized, soulless hiss of sprinkler systems activating at precisely 5 a.m. It was less a community, more a high-strung, meticulously landscaped hostage situation. And I, Dr. Leo Maxwell, DVM, a man who had built a career on controlled chaos and the unpredictable nature of animal intestines, had just willingly bought a ticket to the show. I stood in the gutted-out shell of what would soon be my in-home veterinary clinic, a fine layer of drywall dust coating my boots. Outside the bay window that would one day frame a recovery area for post-op pets, the world was painted in 50 shades of beige. Beige siding, beige trim, beige mailboxes, beige everything. It was the color of surrender. "You know," a gruff voice said from behind me, "I think gregetation might be a better name for this color. It's got notes of gray and regret." I turned to see Gus, my lead contractor, a man built like a vending machine with a mustache that had seen more winters than I had. Next to him, his apprentice Marco was scrolling through his phone, probably looking at memes comparing HOA rules to totalitarian regimes. "I'm trying to bring a little life to the place, Gus, not have it preemptively embalmed," I said, pointing to the paint swatches on the wall. "What do you think? Seafoam breeze or sun-kissed meadow?" Gus squinted. "I think the HOA Architectural Review Committee calls them Code Violation Green Hash 1 and Code Violation Green Hash 2. He was only half joking. My first and only interaction with the reigning monarch of this beige-topia had confirmed as much. Her name was Brenda, and she'd left a laminated 12-point font notice on my door last week, informing me that the welcome basket, a depressing collection of potpourri and a single, flavorless biscotti, had remained on my porch for a staggering 37 minutes, longer than the new resident gifting period allowed. It was a warning shot across the bow of my sanity. When Gus and Marco had arrived that morning, they saw the notice still on my counter. Gus had picked it up, read it, and set it down with the reverence one might afford a radioactive isotope. "You've met the Queen," he'd said, his voice low. "God save you." Marco had shuddered. "Dude, Brenda, my cousin's wife's sister got a fine for having a garden gnome that was non-period appropriate." The house was built in 2008. I was still pondering the existential horror of a period-appropriate gnome when my phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Paws and Whiskers Shelter. I had a good relationship with them, offering my services at a discount to help get their rescues ready for adoption. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Leo Maxwell, whisperer of beasts and master of the parvo vaccine. To whom do I owe the pleasure?" A frantic, high-pitched whisper shot through the phone. "Leo, it's Sarah. I'm trapped." I paused. Gus raised an eyebrow. "Trapped where? Did you fall down a well? This isn't a Lassie episode, is it? Because my collie retrieval skills are a little rusty." "Worse," she squeaked. "I'm in Harmony Creek." My blood ran cold. Oh no. I was just dropping off the foster paperwork for the Millers on Primrose Lane, and this woman has blocked the van. She won't let me leave. She says I've violated Section 8, Subsection B, Article 4 of the Covenant for unauthorized lingering. "Describe the woman," I said, though I already knew. "Platinum blonde bob that looks like it could deflect small arms fire, a face like she just gargled with lemon juice, and she's armed with a clipboard." It was her, Brenda. "She's a monster," Sarah whispered. "And Leo, the puppies are in the van, the golden retriever litter from last week. It's getting hot and they haven't had their water. They're starting to cry." Something inside me snapped. It was a clean, audible twang, like a high-tension cable giving way. Petty tyranny was one thing. Bureaucratic nonsense was another. But endangering a litter of puppies? That was a declaration of war. I looked at Gus, my eyes narrowed. "Fire up the war rig." He stared at me for a beat. Then a slow grin spread across his face, cracking the stoic facade. "Copy that." The war rig was my proudest possession. A custom-fitted Ford Transit that served as my mobile veterinary ambulance. It was my clinic on wheels, fully equipped with an examination table, diagnostic equipment, and medical supplies. Most importantly, it was big, white, and official-looking, with the words, "Maxwell Veterinary Services, Animal Ambulance," emblazoned on the side in bold, authoritative blue letters. And for situations just like this, it had a set of roof-mounted, shockingly bright emergency strobe lights. 2 minutes later, I was pulling onto Primrose Lane. The scene was even more absurd than I had imagined. The large, friendly-looking Paws and Whiskers van was parked innocently by the curb. In front of it, parked at a perfect 90-degree angle and blocking it completely, sat a gleaming white Lexus SUV, polished to a mirror shine. Standing beside it, arms crossed, was Brenda, her power bob unmoving in the gentle breeze. She was in the middle of lecturing a teary-eyed Sarah, jabbing a finger at her clipboard for emphasis. I didn't slow down. I drove right up behind the Lexus, stopping inches from its bumper. I had effectively created a Karen car sandwich. Then, I reached up and flipped the switch. Fwump, 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 fwump. The world exploded in silent pulses of red and white light. The placid beige of the surrounding houses was suddenly painted in the frantic hues of crisis. Windows flew open, doors cracked. The curtain twitchers of Harmony Creek had their matinee. Brenda didn't even turn at first, so engrossed was she in her sermon. And furthermore, the charter explicitly states that commercial vehicles are only permitted for scheduled deliveries between the hours of 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. It is currently 4:18. I leaned out my window, adopting my calmest, most authoritative doctor voice. "Sorry to interrupt. Is there a medical emergency here? I saw the distressed vehicle and the civilian in crisis and responded immediately." She spun around, her face a thundercloud. Her eyes, small and hard, took in my ambulance, the flashing lights, and me. Recognition dawned, followed by pure, unadulterated rage. You're the new vet! Turn off those dreadful lights this instant. This is a private community matter." "Can't," I said cheerfully, giving my dashboard a little pat. "These are my potential animal suffering in progress lights. They're wired directly to my conscience. Very official. Now I believe I was paged about some patients." I looked past her at Sarah, who was staring at me with wide, grateful eyes. "I'm here for the puppies. There are 6 golden retriever puppies in that van that are now officially under my veterinary care, and from what I understand, they're experiencing acute distress due to, well, this." I gestured vaguely at her, her car, and the entire ridiculous situation. "A hostile environmental event. So if you could just pop your Lexus into reverse, I need to conduct a medical assessment." Her lips formed a thin, bloodless line. "This vehicle," she said, pointing a trembling finger at the shelter van, "is in violation. It has overstayed its 15-minute temporary parking allotment. The rules are the rules. And I'm invoking the Animal Welfare Act, which, as a federal statute, generally trumps local HOA covenants about parking," I countered. "Also, the Be a Decent Human Being clause, which is more of a guideline, but one I feel strongly about. Now, are you going to move, or do I need to begin triage on the asphalt?" The standoff was absolute. She was an immovable object of pure spite, and I was an unstoppable force of professional snark. I sighed dramatically, reached into my passenger seat, and pulled out a long, sterile digital rectal thermometer. All right, let's start with a basic diagnostic, I said, holding it up. I looked at her car. I'll need to take the vehicle's temperature. Can you tell me if it's been showing any signs of sluggishness or fever? Behind Brenda, Sarah let out a sound that was half sob, half snort of laughter. That was it. The final indignity. Brenda's face went from angry to incandescent. That's it! I am calling the police! I gave her my brightest, most encouraging smile. Excellent. I've been meaning to report a kidnapping. Please tell them the victims are blonde, adorable, and being held against their will by a woman in sensible orthopedic sandals. The arrival of a police cruiser brought the neighborhood drama to its zenith. More curtains were twitching now. I saw at least 3 neighbors filming with their phones from behind their perfectly pruned hedges. 2 officers stepped out. One was older, with a gut that strained the buttons of his uniform, and an expression that said he'd seen every form of human stupidity twice. This had to be Officer Miller. The other was young, barely out of the academy, with a haircut so sharp you could see the regulations it was cut to. Officer Davis, perfect. Brenda was on them in a flash, launching into her well-rehearsed performance of the concerned, law-abiding citizen besieged by chaos. And he arrived in this gaudy truck with flashing lights, officer, deliberately provoking a confrontation and claiming some sort of medical authority over a simple parking violation, she finished, her voice thick with outrage. Officer Davis, the rookie, dutifully took notes. A parking violation, ma'am. I see. Officer Miller, the veteran, just stared at the scene. My ambulance, Brenda's Lexus, the shelter van, and me, leaning against my door like I was waiting for a bus. His eyes were heavy with a weariness that transcended space and time. He ambled over to me. Let me guess, he said, his voice a low rumble. Section 8, subsection B, Article 4. You know the sacred texts, I replied. I've got them memorized, he sighed. Brenda's got me on speed dial. What's your side of it? Animal welfare call, I said, keeping it professional. 6 8-week-old puppies in that van. It's 85 degrees out. They're starting to show signs of heat stress. I came to assess and provide aid. My access is being obstructed. Davis joined us, his notepad at the ready. Ma'am, I understand your position on the community bylaws, he said, turning to Brenda with painstaking diplomacy. Sir, I understand your concern for the animals. This appears to be a civil matter. Brenda's eyes widened. Civil, officer? He is operating an unlicensed commercial enterprise from his vehicle right here on Primrose Lane. It's a pro bono emergency rescue, I shot back, raising my voice so the phone-wielding neighbors could hear. Are you anti-puppy, Brenda? Is that going to be your platform in the next HOA election? Harmony Creek, great landscaping dead puppies? A gasp went through the invisible audience. Officer Miller rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of profound spiritual exhaustion. Brenda, he said, his voice dangerously calm. We've been over this. You can't just blockade people with your car. It's called unlawful detainment. He turned his tired gaze to Sarah. Ma'am, has she threatened you or damaged your vehicle? Sarah, looking small and overwhelmed, just shook her head. Then it's a civil issue, Miller declared. He fixed his eyes on Brenda. But that Lexus is parked in the middle of the road, and that ambulance looks an awful lot like an emergency vehicle to me. You're obstructing a potential emergency response. Move your car, now, or I'm writing you a ticket that'll make your HOA dues look like pocket change. Checkmate. The threat of an official, city-issued fine, a mark on her permanent record, was the one thing that could pierce Brenda's HOA, fortified armor. She shot me a look that promised a future filled with pain and suffering, stalked to her Lexus, and moved it with a squeal of tires. Freedom. Sarah practically fell out of the shelter van, her face a mess of relief. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, I said, watching Brenda's white SUV disappear around the corner. The battle is over. The war has just begun. I was right. The next morning, my front door looked like it had been vandalized by a deranged bureaucrat. It was plastered with official-looking laminated notices, each bearing the Harmony Creek Estates letterhead and Brenda's imperious signature. Gus and Marco found me sitting on the floor of the would-be clinic, surrounded by the paper-based assault. I read them aloud in a dramatic monotone. Notice of violation #1, improperly parked commercial vehicle. The offending vehicle, a white Ford Transit, was parked in the resident's driveway overnight. As per Section 12, commercial vehicles must be garaged. Notice of violation #2, unapproved exterior modifications. A particle of paint, color code Z foam breeze, was observed on a non-approved decorative shrub, violating the flora and fauna aesthetic guidelines. Notice of violation #3. Nuisance noise. Loud percussive sounds consistent with construction were reported at 10:14 a.m. But we're allowed to make noise from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Marco said, frowning. It's in our contractor permit. Details, I said, picking up the last, most sinister notice. And the grand finale. Notice of violation #4, unauthorized business operation. The resident has demonstrated intent to operate a veterinary business on the premises without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee and a majority vote from the board. Gus let out a low whistle. That's a preemptive strike. She's trying to kill your clinic before it's even born. She's trying to bleed me dry with 1,000 paper cuts, I said, crumpling a notice in my fist. A deep, primal anger began to bubble up from my gut. It was the same feeling I got when I saw an animal that had been neglected. It was the righteous fury of the just. Marco's eyes, however, were gleaming with a strange light. He was a product of his generation, a kid who had grown up in the digital trenches of online forums and comment sections. He saw this not as a problem, but as a challenge. A game. Dude, he said, his voice electric with excitement. We have to fight back. Not with fists. Not even with ambulances. We have to fight her with rules. He leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. Malicious compliance. It's an art form. We gotta find the HOA charter online. I bet it's a goldmine of stupid. A slow, wicked grin spread across my face. Marco, I said, you're a genius. That night, fueled by coffee and spite, Marco and I waged digital war. He located the Harmony Creek Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions on the community website. It was a 250-page PDF document, a masterpiece of legalese so dense and convoluted it could have been used to train CIA agents in psychological warfare. To me, a man who had read Merck's veterinary manual for fun, it was a treasure map. I spent hours reading, highlighting, cross-referencing, and cackling with a glee that probably would have earned me another noise complaint. The counteroffensive began the next morning. Phase 1, Operation Petunia. I took a tape measure and a camera to Brenda's front yard at the crack of dawn. Her prize-winning petunias, the pride of Primrose Lane, were indeed magnificent. They were also, I discovered, in gross violation of Section 19, Subsection C, Floral and Fauna Aesthetic Guidelines, which clearly stipulated that annual flowerbed plantings must not exceed a height of 8 inches. Several of Brenda's prize specimens were a brazen 8¼ inches. I documented the infraction with photographic evidence from multiple angles, the tape measure clearly visible. I filed a formal complaint online before my first cup of coffee. Phase 2, Operation Solar Glare. Later that day, when the sun was at its highest, I filed a second complaint. Citing a wonderfully vague clause in the charter about Maintaining community safety and avoiding public nuisances, I reported that the hazardous solar glare, reflecting off Brenda's pristinely washed Lexus SUV, which she always parked in her driveway, was creating a dangerous visual impediment for traffic at the intersection of Primrose and Petal Lane. I included a diagram. Phase 3, the sprinkler gambit. This was Marco's masterpiece. Using Google Earth's satellite imagery and the HOA plot map from the county website, he ran a hydrological analysis of Brenda's sprinkler system. His findings were shocking. Her front lawn sprinkler head, Zone 3, consistently overshot her property line by a scandalous 2 inches, depositing precious community water directly onto the common area sidewalk. I filed another complaint, this time for the misappropriation of community water resources and contributing to sidewalk erosion. Gus played his part with deadpan perfection. He and Marco began scheduling their loudest, most essential tasks for precisely 7:01 a.m. The very minute construction noise was legally permitted. The sound of a concrete saw biting into the foundation at that hour, I imagined, was a beautiful symphony of compliance. They also developed a habit of taking their legally mandated breaks right by the fence line, separating my property from Brenda's. Their conversations, always loud and clear, revolved around things like property line disputes, the legal height of decorative fences, and the fascinating world of unpermitted backyard structures. The retaliation was swift. A new notice appeared. My trash cans had been placed at the curb at 7:05 p.m. the night before pickup. A clear violation of the 8 p.m. rule. I was descending into a level of petty I hadn't experienced since middle school, and I was loving every second of it. But I knew this tit-for-tat skirmish couldn't last. I needed a decisive blow. I needed to go for the jugular. And then, I found my weapon of mass destruction. I was chatting with Mrs. Gable from down the street while her arthritic old corgi Winston got his laser therapy treatment. Pro bono, of course. She was a sweet old lady and a world-class gossip. And of course, you simply must know about Brenda's annual summer soiree, she whispered, as if the hedges had ears. It's the social event of the season. Terribly exclusive. She invites the entire board, all her little friends. It's a major power play. She holds it in her backyard, right next to her precious gazebo. An idea began to form in my mind. It was audacious, it was diabolical, and it was absolutely beautiful. That evening, I sat down at my computer and designed a flyer. The headline was cheerful and bold. Announcing the first annual Harmony Creek Pet Wellness Day. The flyer advertised a free, family-friendly event to be held on my own front lawn. The date and time just so happened to coincide perfectly with Brenda's exclusive summer soiree. The offerings were irresistible to any pet-owning suburbanite. Free nail trims for all resident dogs and cats. Free dental health checks and treat samples. A special Meet the Heroes session with the adorable golden retriever puppies I had rescued. Free coffee for the humans and pup cups for the pets. The next night, under the cover of darkness, Marco transformed into a suburban ninja. He moved silently through the neighborhood, depositing a flyer at every single house. Every house, that is, except for Brenda's. The fallout was immediate. The neighborhood's online forum, usually a sedate space for discussing lost cats and sprinkler maintenance, lit up. People were excited. Free vet services? Puppies? It was a no-brainer. They would have to choose, attend a stuffy, elitist garden party, or get free stuff for their beloved fur babies and bask in the glow of adorable puppies. Brenda, I heard through the grapevine, was apoplectic. This wasn't just a challenge, it was a public mockery. It was a direct assault on her social standing and her authority. She saw the Pet Wellness Day for exactly what it was, a declaration of total war. and she responded in kind. The official-looking envelope arrived via certified mail a few days later. It wasn't a violation notice. It was a summons. Brenda had leveraged her position, collected signatures from her cronies, and filed a formal petition for an emergency HOA board meeting. The agenda was simple and brutal: to present evidence for the immediate and permanent revocation of my in-progress construction permit and to pass a new bylaw specifically banning any and all in-home veterinary practices within Harmony Creek Estates. She had fabricated a story about my dear, sweet, profoundly deaf 15-year-old beagle, Walter, barking incessantly through the night. She'd included grainy, long-lens photos of my house taken by a private investigator that made it look less like a home renovation and more like a staging ground for a paramilitary operation. The battle of the flyers and the bylaws was over. The final showdown was set. The community clubhouse was a temple of beige, a room so devoid of personality it actively sucked the soul out of you. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the 30 or so residents seated in neat rows of stackable chairs. It was a mix of Brenda's loyalists, tight-lipped women with identical haircuts and men in crisp polo shirts, and the merely curious, drawn by the scent of blood in the water. At the head of the room, behind a long folding table, sat the HOA board. Brenda was in the center, flanked by two lieutenants, a severe-looking woman named Carol and a man named Gary who looked like he'd been born wearing pleated khakis. Brenda's face was a mask of grim determination. This was her domain. I sat in the front row, flanked by my own team. Gus was on my left, looking as immovable as a mountain. Marco was on my right, fidgeting with his phone, a nervous energy buzzing around him. I, however, felt a strange sense of calm. I had come prepared. Brenda stood up and began her presentation. It was a masterclass in propaganda. She had a PowerPoint, complete with bullet points and dramatic transitions. She painted a picture of me as a disruptive, arrogant outsider, a commercial invader who cared nothing for the sacred peace and harmony of their community. This man, she said, pointing a finger at me, arrived not with a spirit of neighborliness, but with a flagrant disregard for our rules. She clicked to a slide showing a grainy photo of my ambulance with its lights flashing. He brought chaos to our quiet streets. Click. A slide with a picture of the Pet Wellness Day flyer. He seeks to turn our residential neighborhood into a bustling commercial zone, bringing traffic, noise, and who knows what kind of disease right to our doorsteps. She presented her petition, signed by her cronies. She presented her fabricated evidence of Walter's supposed late-night barking rampages. She ended with a dramatic, quavering plea. We have all worked so hard to make Harmony Creek a sanctuary, to protect our property values and our way of life. I ask the board to act decisively to stop this industrial veterinary complex before it can take root. She sat down to a smattering of applause from her section. Carol and Gary nodded gravely. It looked bad. Then, the board president, a man who looked tired of all of this, said, "Mr. Maxwell, do you have a rebuttal?" "I do," I said, standing up and walking to the podium. I placed a single, slim folder on its surface. I had no PowerPoint, no charts. "Good evening," I began, scanning the room. "My name is Leo Maxwell, and yes, I am a vet. My job is to heal animals. It's what I do. Brenda is right about one thing. I have a deep and abiding respect for rules, especially when they're used to protect the vulnerable." I opened my folder. First, I'd like to address the incident that started all of this. Marco tapped a key on his laptop, and the large TV screen that Brenda had used for her presentation flickered to life. It showed crystal-clear footage from my front door security camera, time-stamped from the day of the incident. The room watched in silence as the whole scene played out. Brenda's condescending lecture, her absolute refusal to move her car, Sarah's quiet, desperate pleas for the puppies in the van. The audio was perfect. My voice was calm and reasonable. Hers was shrill and tyrannical. The mood in the room began to shift. You could feel it. "Next," I said as the video ended, "Brenda has made some serious accusations about my conduct and that of my contractors." I gestured to Gus and Marco. "Gus, could you please share your experience?" Gus stood up. He was not an eloquent man, but his words had weight. "She spied on us," he said simply, his voice rumbling through the quiet room. "Stood behind her fence, timing our brakes with a stopwatch, peered through our windows, filed complaints when we were following the rules. I've been a contractor for 25 years. I've never seen anything like it." Then it was time for my star witness. On cue, the back door of the clubhouse opened. Sarah walked in. In her arms, she held a wriggling, impossibly fluffy golden retriever puppy. It let out a tiny, happy yip. An audible, collective "oh" swept through the room. It was a weapon of mass cuteness, and it hit its target with devastating accuracy. Sarah reached the podium, her voice shaking slightly, but clear. "My name is Sarah, and I'm a volunteer at the Paws and Whiskers shelter. The puppy I'm holding is named Lucky. He and his 5 siblings are alive and healthy today because of Dr. Maxwell. When Brenda blocked our van, they were in real danger. Dr. Maxwell didn't bring chaos. He brought help. He is a hero to our shelter, and he is a friend to animals. To deny him his clinic would be a tragedy for all the other animals in this neighborhood who might one day need a hero like him." She hugged Lucky close, and the puppy licked her chin. Brenda's case was crumbling. But I wasn't done. I had saved the best for last. I picked up my folder again. "Brenda is right," I repeated, my voice dropping. "The rules are the rules. They are here to maintain order and preserve the aesthetic integrity of our community, which is why I was so shocked during my own research into our bylaws to uncover a major violation, one that threatens the very foundation of Harmony Creek." I held up a blown-up copy of a document. This is a 1987 addendum to the HOA Charter. It's titled Regulation of Non-Native and Invasive Flora. It was enacted to protect our local ecosystem. I then held up a large, glossy photo of Brenda's front yard, showcasing her magnificent, prize-winning rose bushes. These beautiful roses, I discovered, are a variety of Rosa multiflora, a beautiful but notoriously invasive non-native species explicitly banned by the very rules Brenda claims to cherish. A wave of shocked whispers went through the room. Brenda went pale. "But wait," I said, holding up a hand. "There's more." I pulled out one last document. In the spirit of full transparency, I also did a cursory review of county permit records. It's all public information, after all, and I found something interesting. Or rather, I found a lack of something. I looked directly at Brenda. Her face was now as white as her Lexus. "It seems the charming gazebo in Brenda's backyard, the centerpiece of her annual summer soiree, I'm told, was built in 2012. Yet there is no record of a building permit ever being filed with or approved by the county. An unpermitted structure of that size," I said, letting the words hang in the air, "would, of course, have to be torn down immediately." Silence. Absolute, pin-drop silence. The only sound was the gentle hum of the fluorescent lights. Brenda stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, her carefully constructed world shattered into a million pieces. She had been beaten, not with anger or force, but with her own weapon, the rule book. She had been publicly, surgically, and maliciously complianced into oblivion. The board president cleared his throat. "Well," he said, looking at the mountain of evidence, at the puppy, at Brenda's horrified face. The board will now vote on the petition to deny Mr. Maxwell's clinic. It wasn't even close. Unanimous rejection. Furthermore, the president added, looking sternly at Brenda, in light of this new information, the board will be opening a formal investigation into a number of potential community violations, as well as launching a full audit of all architectural modifications approved during Mrs. Henderson's tenure as committee chair. It was over. Brenda didn't say a word. She stood up, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury, and stormed out of the clubhouse, followed by the sympathetic glares of no one. The moment the door slammed shut behind her, the room erupted. Not in wild cheers, but in something better, a wave of relieved applause. Neighbors I'd never spoken to came up to shake my hand, to pat my back. Mrs. Gable gave me a hug. We were all so afraid of her, she confessed. Thank you. I had become the unlikely liberator of Beige-topia. A month later, the grand opening of the Harmony Creek Veterinary Clinic was in full swing. My front lawn, the former battlefield, was now a scene of joyous, controlled chaos. Dozens of neighbors, their dogs, cats, and even one brave ferret mingled happily. Gus and Marco were manning a grill, handing out hot dogs and basking in their newfound hero status. Sarah was there with the Paws and Whiskers adoption team, and Lucky the puppy was being swarmed by adoring children. The sign above my door was tasteful. The new landscaping was immaculate, and every single plant was 100% compliant with all known bylaws. I was inside my new, state-of-the-art surgical suite, giving Walter his monthly checkup. He licked my hand, his old tail giving a weak thump-thump-thump against the exam table. From my window, I had a perfect view of the street. Across the way, a team of professional landscapers was solemnly, methodically, digging up the last of what was once Brenda's prize-winning illegal rose garden. Her famous gazebo was already gone, leaving a sad, circular patch of dirt in her backyard. She was standing on her porch, watching them, her arms crossed. She felt my gaze and looked up, her eyes meeting mine from across the street. Even from that distance, I could feel the sheer, unadulterated hatred radiating from her. It was a palpable force. I came to Harmony Creek looking for a quiet life. Instead, I found a war. But in fighting it, in diving headfirst into the petty trenches of HOA politics, I'd accidentally found something I didn't even know I was looking for. A community. It wasn't perfect, and it sure as hell wasn't beige anymore. I looked at Brenda's furious face, then back at the wagging tails and happy clients filling my clinic. I raised my coffee mug in a silent, cheerful salute. She glared back, a promise of future battles in her eyes. I just smirked and turned back to my patient. Game on, Brenda, game on. The puppies and I were here to stay.